Tools that we need for today. We've got a flathead screwdriver, a 7mm socket, we've got a Phillips screwdriver, a ratchet with a 10mm socket and an extension. We've got a pair of needle nose pliers, some cutters, some channel locks, a couple of zip ties, a hose to drain the water out, and we've got a replacement pump. So before we start anything, we're going to drain any remaining water out of the drum. To do that, we're going to open up the access panel on the bottom. You just push the tab down, it should open up. If it doesn't right away, you can just take a little flathead screwdriver and pop it open. There's a couple tabs in the bottom. This door, for now, we're going to have to take it off. So you can just squeeze these tabs in. It'll release. You can take it, set it out of the way. There's a little drain hose. I've already drained mine, but what you'll want to do is you can pop out the plug, grab a little section of hose. You can put that on and run it to a nearby drain. Just let it drain. If it's like mine was fully full when I started. So it'll take a little while to drain out. It's not a big hole. There's a fair bit of water in there. Once it's all drained out, you can take the plug and stick it back in. So while we're down here, grab your Phillips screwdriver. There's going to be one screw right in the bottom here. And we can remove that for now. But later on, we're going to have to pull this out. So while we're down here, we'll just pop out that screw, make it nice and simple. So the next step, like any other appliance repair, is we're going to unplug it. Now I've gone ahead and I've already removed the two brackets on the back of the top panel. They're each held in with two Phillips screws, so you can just undo those, pull them off, set them aside. Then we're going to remove the top panel. It just slides straight back, lifts off, and we can set that aside. So the next step is we're going to have to remove this drawer so we can get out a couple of screws. So the easiest way is you just pull it straight out. There's a little locking tab right in the center back here. You can just push this little piece down, and the whole thing will just remove and pop out. This is that little locking tab, so you can just push it down and it'll come out. You set that aside. Now that we've got the drawer removed, there'll be 3 Phillips screws that we need to remove. One on each side of the drawer and one in the back here. So we can grab our Phillips screwdriver. We'll just pop these 3 out. And we can set those aside. Now that we've taken out the 3 screws, on the back of the panel there's a couple of little clips. So you just need to basically lift the panel up to release those clips. It'll come off, you know. Just be careful that you don't break any plastic. There's a couple wires back here that are just held in with a twist tie. So if you undo that twist tie, it'll just release the 2 wires to the point where we can take this and set it out of the way. So now that we've got this front panel out of the way, we're going to open up the door. And we basically have to just release this liner, the rubber gasket seal. So it's held in place. There's a little V-groove around this edge, and you'll see that there's a wire cable and then a set of spring tensioner in the bottom. So what we can do is we can get your screwdriver, just get behind that spring, and then you can just slowly work its way around. Once you get that first little section, the rest will just come off like nothing. That's basically what it looks like. You can set that aside. And then this rubber gasket, you can just peel it off. Just nice and careful that you don't ruin it. And it'll release all the way around. It's fairly simple. So once the rubber gasket has all been released, you can kind of just tuck it in just so it's kind of out of the way. It's kind of springy, so it's going to want to go back. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to do these 6 screws, and then this whole door will lift off. Be careful once you remove them. We're going to just move it a little bit. There's the locking mechanism. It's got a wire harness in the back. Once we release this, we can lean it forward. It gives us better access. You can kind of reach through here if you want. It's just a little better with the better access. So we'll grab our Phillips screwdriver and we'll release these 6 screws. And we can set those aside. So we've taken out 2 of the screws. Some of these are being a little stubborn. So instead of stripping them, I'm going to grab a 7mm socket. And then we can take those ones out. Alright, so we got 5 of the 6 screws taken out. We're going to leave this one in place just to support the door. We have to take out this beige plastic liner here. There's a locking tab at the top. You can just push it down and the whole thing will just pop out. We can set that aside. And there's one more screw down at the bottom. It's a Phillips head. It just locks the bottom of the door panel in place. We take that out, we can set it aside, and we can take out our last screw. Here what we're going to do is just be careful. We'll take out the last screw, we'll lean the door out, lift it up, and once we have a little bit extra room, then we can take off that wiring harness. So you need to support the door so it doesn't fall while you take that last screw out. Take that apart, the whole thing will lift off, and we can pivot it around. See what we're doing. So here's the door locking mechanism and the wiring harness. You can see there's this little locking clip. It's kind of tight, so you can give it a squeeze. What you might need to do is take a flathead screwdriver and then just get that locking tab right there to release, and then just kind of give it a good wiggle, and it should come out. There we go. So now the harness is released, door's all free. We can pull it apart or pull it out and set it aside. So now that we've got the door panel off, we have free access to the pump housing. So we're going to have to remove a couple hoses so that we can get the pump housing out. You need your needle nose pliers. There's just a couple of clamps. You just squeeze the clamp, slide it up over the nipple, and then you can pull it off. There's the larger one here, same thing. Squeeze it, move it up, it'll pop off. This is that drain hose that I was telling you about that gets really clogged up. So while you've got everything apart and access to the back, I would give it a good flush where you can replace it. For now you can just tuck it out of the way. Then we're going to grab a 10mm socket. So for this one, it's held to an aluminum bracket at the bottom, held in with 3 10mm bolts. So we'll just remove those bolts. So now that we've got the 3 bolts out, there's one more line I forgot about. It's the main drain line that feeds the water from the drum into the pump. Again, Has the same sort of squeeze type locking mechanism. Just use your channel pliers and you can pop that off in the back. There's a couple of wires that connect all the pumps. You'll need to take them out of their retaining clips. And then there's a little harness right in the center here that's zip tied, at least in my case it's zip tied to the frame body at the bottom. So we'll need to cut those zip ties off. That's the harness. And then we're going to need to take off this grounding screw. And then that'll allow us to take the whole harness of the pump. Set that grounding screw aside. And this whole pump housing, now we can get the whole thing out. And there we go. We've got this last drain line on the back. It'll have to come off in a second. There we go. Alright, now I've got the pump housing all out. Can kind of get the wires out of their connecting harnesses. And then just pay attention. So we're just going to remove the drain pump. So pay attention to which wire is going where. So in this case we've got the black wire going to the top connector and the brown wire going to the bottom. So we can just remove those. Set them aside. And basically the pump body is held to the bracket. There's a screw on the front face, screw on the back, and two in the bottom. And we can pull out all these 10mm bolts. Set them aside. And we can take out the bottom two screws. Screw from the front. And the screw from the back. Set the bracket aside. So the pump motor is held in place with 3 screws. They're just Phillips screws, so we can remove those. And the pump will just pull off. And there's your pump motor. You can see it's totally gone. The impellers have been totally ground off, and actually the spindle for the motor is released. So that's garbage. What we're going to do is remove this plastic mounting bracket from the pump. So you can just grab a flathead screwdriver, pry into the front edge, and then it'll release. And then there's a little piece here that you'll have to pry up over. And then the whole thing comes off. This is garbage, so you can get rid of it. Maybe before you do, you can just make sure that everything looks like it's the same. Same. Everything looks good. So we can put the pump into the into the housing here. And then basically there's a couple retaining alignment tabs. You'll have to line those up. So, but before you do, make sure this is nice and clean so that the rubber O-ring makes a nice clean seal. So you can line up those tabs and it just pushes into place. And we can replace those screws. Then we can attach it back to the mounting plate. We can start with the bottom two screws. And it's basically back together. We can take the power harness, and again, like we said when we took it off, black to the top, round to the bottom. And we're ready to put it back into place. Grab our 3 bolts. We can just set them in. And then we're just going to feed it in like we took it out. And just make sure that this drain hose goes underneath the pump and back into its little hole. And then there's the clips that you took the brown wire out of. You can set them back in. And then we're going to go around and put in the bolts. I just find they're easier to put in by hand first. And then we can snug them up. Now I can grab a couple zip ties and we can attach this harness again. We can just trim off the loose ends. Put on our grounding screw. we've got the pump housing mounted back onto the washer frame. We're going to reattach all of the hoses. This back hose is really a soft hose, so it's probably a little easier if you take its clamp off. It gives you a chance to compress it out here where you can have a little easier access to it, and then you can just feed it all through. And then you can get it nice and tight. It's kind of awkward in there, so it's much easier if you do it outside. And we can grab the main drain line again with our needle nose pliers. You can compress that one. And we can slip it on. Then we can take the other one. There we go. So that's all the hoses back on. The bolts are put in. Harness is put back on. 2 wires on the pump motor are put back on. The grounding wire is put back on. So now it's all ready to put the door back on. We're just about done. Alright, so we're going to go in the reverse order of what we did before. So we're going to take the door, pivot it over here. That allows us to take the wiring harness, and clip it back on for the door lock. And then we can just pivot the door around. We can lift it up. There's the 3 tabs in the bottom the door clips onto. And you just lean it forward. Now we can reinstall all of our screws. And again, it's probably easier to just use the 7mm socket. Now these are machine screws, so you just want to make sure they're threaded properly before they go in, so you don't strip them anything. And don't forget about the one on the bottom. We can replace our cover plate. You can just take your hose, clip it back in place. Replace the first screw we took out. Put the cover back on. And now we can put the seal back on the inside so we can pop the door open. And we can pull the seal all the way around. What you'll see is in the back, it's kind of like a little V-groove that goes into there's just a little metal flange here that just has to go and get tucked around. So then once it's clipped all the way around, you can get our retaining wire again. Just make sure you position the spring at the bottom. And once you get most of the way around, you can grab your needle nose pliers and a flat blade screwdriver. We're just going to grab this end of the spring, and we're going to give it some tension. We're going to pull so we can get this wire in the last little bit. And you can use your flatbed screwdriver to kind of work its way around. Too far this way, so you can probably just grab it and slide it around. You'll see you can probably find the old marks where it was sitting. And you can just confirm that the wire is fully seated in the V groove. And it looks all good to me. And this is where we show you the mistakes. If you haven't noticed, my light is inside right about here. So now I'm going to take it all apart. There we go. All right. So just to go over again, we put in the pump housing, 3 bolts, all of the hoses, front cover, tied in the harness, the grounding screw, put in the wiring harness again, and we put the 7 screws on, the extra screw for the cover plate, the rubber gasket, and the retaining wire. Now we're ready to put the top pump back. So now might be a good time, it's kind of grody in here, so we can give that a little bit of a wipe, make sure it's clean. Then we can put our front cover back on. So what you'll see is there's a couple tabs on the bottom and a couple slots, so you have to make sure that those go in. But before you do that, we're going to put these 2 wires back into position with that twist tie. There's three tabs here that go into these 3 slots, and then there's tabs across the top that lock into this rail. So you have to make sure that you get these 3 tabs into those slots. And then that's all back in. We can put this screw in, and these 2. So that's the front cover put in. We'll put the drawer back in. Now that's all that's left is to put the top cover on. Top cover. We'll put our brackets back on. So we can plug it back in. So now that the top cover is all done, got it plugged in. Just to test it, what we'll do is we'll start, let it fill up a little bit, we'll stop the load, and then we'll just do a drain. That should be enough water for this test. So we'll turn it off. Turn the machine off. We'll start it again. And then we're just going to do a drain cycle. Works like a dream. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up and like, and please subscribe, and hopefully we can give you some more videos.